should there be places that humans shouldn't be allowed to go?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's something to be said about leaving a slice of habitat for nature, as tempting as it might be to venture there. I also think, going back to Ecuador, the system that the Galapagos has kind of pioneered might be a nice happy medium as well. I am all for keeping isolated islands, especially like the Andaman Islands. Where a lot of those tribes have never been in contact with people, leave that alone. And if there are wilderness areas where people are literally dying to reach it, you don't need to go. But in the Galapagos, what they do is every couple of years, they rotate the different snorkel and dive sites people are allowed to go to let wildlife, reacclimate to just being a part of the ocean rather than dealing with a bunch of people with tanks on blowing bubbles in their face all day, or snorkelers slapping all over the surface of the water. And I think rotating, people rotate hiking trails and things as well now around the world. And I think rotating and giving people the opportunity to witness different sides and different sites of the same place while letting others recover is really beautiful. Otherwise, you get into a situation like Maya Bay in Thailand, where it was in that one movie, and all of a sudden everybody descended upon it, and it got to the point where it was so destroyed that people lost their privileges. They couldn't go anymore.
Now, getting back to sea turtles, if one has never seen one before, please describe what it is about them that makes them so captivating.
Oh my goodness. There's so much. I think, first of all, they just look so weird compared to what we're used to on land. This awkward animal like hoisting itself onto a beach with the power of its flippers and this giant heavy shell, and you can hear how loud they're breathing, how much effort it takes to get up there. Yet they persist. I think watching a nesting turtle is like watching an Olympic athlete, because they go so far up the sand and their bodies are so heavy. They're used to, being a little more buoyant around in the ocean, and seeing the strength these animals have is unbelievable. So seeing them on the beach is really cool in that way. Another way most people see them is in the water, because that's where they spend most of their lives. And their demeanor is just so chill. I aspire to be like a sea turtle in terms of the level of chill. How leisurely they glide through. Any ocean animal barely moves and off they go so quickly through the water. It's amazing. But it's that type of tourism that I had been searching for a word to describe for literal years since I found it in Costa Rica. And it's tourism that benefits the community and the place, the environment, more than it takes away. And it's difficult to achieve, but once it's there, it's those beautiful experiences that are almost formative for people in a way. So many people that I had talked to in regenerative experience setting versus something more run-of-the-mill conventional, almost all of them were like, this is an experience I'll remember forever. I'm fundamentally changed. And you don't think about how these things can rewire your brain. And I think as I was writing that paper, from just my own experience as a scientist, I knew I had to get all my points in, right? What does it do for the people? What does it do for the planet? How do we intertwine these things? And how does that play into the quality of your experience as a traveler? Here's why this model of tourism is important if you want to put a little more care into your vacation decisions. But I also wanted to describe it in a way that made it appetizing and appealing for the guests, rather than feeling like I have to, or I'm going to feel really bad about myself if I don't do this. I find that the best sustainability related action comes from being inspired rather than being discouraged, and so finding the balance between, yes, lots of tourism can really be harmful, but here's all the wonderful things that it can do when you take just a little extra oomph to.
Just thought I'd have a quick word, just to recognize that this is the 10th series, an anniversary of a kind. It's been 2 years, 60 guests. I just wanted to say thank you for for all of your perspectives on travel and how appreciative I am of your time. It's been absolutely amazing. And now, back to this week's episode. Hey, welcome to the Nifty Travel Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And the thing that I always like to ask my guests first is about their earliest memories of travel.
Ooh, that's a great question. So I grew up in Arizona, and so we spent a lot of summers when it was way too hot outside driving to San Diego, where we could hang out, see the ocean, get some cooler temperatures, and just relax. So my earliest travel memories are everybody piling into the car for an 8-hour drive to go find cooler air.
Yeah, very exciting too, and very different to Arizona's, which was presumably why it happened.
Yeah.
And did you get any inkling in your sort of formative years in Arizona that travel and animals and everything else would be more important later, or was it kind of something that came along gradually?
I think I always knew that I was pretty into the outdoors, especially wildlife. So we moved to a pretty rural part of Arizona outside of Tucson when I was in second grade. And from there, I was what I like to call an outside child. It was very hard to get me to come in unless, somebody was out of a front door saying, hey, okay, lights fading, get in the house. But I could have stayed out there and looked at the birds and, peeked at what was hiding under rocks forever. So I really enjoyed getting to connect with the desert in that way. And then, getting to experience California and already seeing that so many different things existed beyond my backyard really piqued my curiosity from the time I was tiny.
Yeah, I bet. So from your time in Arizona then, what is special about growing up there?
There's honestly so much. I think the sunsets, for one, are just some of the most spectacular I've ever seen in my entire life. The whole entire sky is just neon with color, and the mountains start to turn bright purple as the light fades. And it's some of my most beautiful sunset memories have happened in Arizona. I think also getting to live in that more rural area, it's a giant suburb now, which is crazy. But getting to really experience what it's like to live where the sounds at night are coyotes or mountain lions or whatever night birds are out. Getting to experience life with no streetlights. The stars were absolutely fantastic, and being able to almost unplug outside, like right outside of my door, and just experience nature, I think really pushed me to move into the field of environmental science in general. But it also taught me that such a harsh environment really can be a special place. I mean, so many animals that are just ridiculously adapted, plants too, to the environment, just absolutely thrive there. And, you look out on a hot day where it's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, everything's fine. But you're not, so I think it gave me a lot of respect for all of the wildlife, flora and fauna that hung out outside my door while I had to stay in the air conditioning.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The creatures, the other creatures that walk about our planet, they're remarkably adaptive.
Yeah.
So what do you think is special, let's say, about mountain scenery? I always like to get people's perspective on mountains because, well, they're bigger than us.
Yeah, truly. I really do think it's just being able to look up at something so absolutely massive. And now in my biology nerd brain thinking about, well, look, this type of ecosystem is here and you can see where the trees change to this, and at the top of the mountain it's super hot below and you have snow. Seeing just how much change can happen as you go up at elevation just by looking at a mountain straight on is insane. And then being able to to travel up a mountain, for example, and just slowly watching just how high perched above the world you are. I mean, mountains offer us so many different perspectives that we wouldn't get if everything was just flat all the time. And I don't know, there's something comforting about seeing a mountain in the evening or at sunset, just the way that, they turn colors, or, you wake up and the same mountain at sunrise is there at sunset, but it's a completely different perspective. I mean, it just adds a lot of beauty to the landscape, in my opinion. Now that I live without them, I find myself missing them.
Yeah. But it's funny though, isn't it? When we fly over the Earth, everything seems so completely flat. I always seem absolutely surprised when I get down to Earth again that it's not as flat as it was when I was looking down.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're up high, it almost looks like crinkles in construction paper when you push paper together, and it's like a giant mountain when you get on the ground. You're like, oh my God. It's beautiful.
So you grew up in Arizona. You went on holidays to the West Coast. So did that influence where you wanted to go for further education?
Ooh, that's such a good question. So I moved to California as a teenager. My parents wanted me to have just a few more educational opportunities because there's not a ton of universities out there in Arizona. And I'm really grateful for it. It was a very interesting transition, moving from the middle of nowhere to the suburbs. But, it's good to learn how to adapt when you're young. And I really enjoyed the ocean. Honestly, I was pretty scared of having the ocean in my backyard just because I was used to being able to sit on the sand, but now all my friends wanted to go in it. So I had to get over that fear, which turned into a fascination, ended up going down the marine biology rabbit hole. And I think I wouldn't have discovered that if I hadn't had consistent access to a giant body of water. So that was really helpful. But I think ultimately being able to, number one, live in a climate where you could go outside all the time and not just seasonally, really changed my own perspective on things. Outside season didn't have to be temporary. I didn't have to sit and look out my window for half the year, and so I think California was an interesting transition, but it also taught me a lot about the different ecosystems that I hadn't discovered yet. And it just made me want more. And there's so much diversity in California too, to be able to access and explore. Like I still could get a little piece of that desert in Joshua Tree National Park or go up to the Sierras. And I mean, I really had seen snow probably 3 times before I moved to California. So that was crazy. And I just think the opportunities to explore were so great that what started out as me being kind of curious became a full-blown fascination, and I had to see as much of the state as I could, which Arizona is awesome. A lot of it looks the same unless you're up in the Four Corners area over by New Mexico, or somewhere in the middle near a body of water.
Ah, right. So it sounds like that when you went to California then, you got into hiking.
Oh yeah, big time. I had hiked a bit when I was a kid, but like I said, it was more of a seasonal thing. And just having access to coastal trails, there's a lot of bluffs where I ended up living in California, and being able to just wander along the bluffs or down the beach forever. I found myself walking for a lot longer than I was normally able to in Arizona, just, heat related limitations, unless it was the winter, in which case we did hike quite a bit. But also just having access to trails I could walk to. Most of the trails near my house in Arizona were unpaved, and so it was more of a you better find your way back home sort of situation. So things were a lot shorter versus I could walk down the street, see a little gate, and up I could go up a hill. And I don't know, there was a lot of freedom that came with that. And hiking has totally become one of my favorite activities, although as adult responsibilities come, you do it less and less. But I feel like that makes each hike you really get to do now as a real adult more special. So,
yeah. So do you feel that you've made a lot of discoveries then that perhaps you wouldn't have done if you hadn't have had that opportunity?
I think so, yeah. And it's interesting because when you're in the moment and it's this big transition and you're away from your friends and everything looks different, everyone acts different, it's really hard. But looking back on it, I would not trade it for the world. I think it was more of getting out of my comfort zone and adjusting to a new environment for the first time rather than, oh my gosh, this place is horrible and ugly and blah, blah, blah. No, it was just different. And so I think looking back on that experience with kinder eyes, I'm so grateful for how far all of that discovery at once pushed me out of my comfort zone because it made me more adaptable to change later on, and it allowed me to learn how to embrace things that were long-term big changes rather than feeling comfortable just in the same spot all the time. And I think those experiences that I had transitioning to California are what pushed me to want to go international more and discover and discover and discover. And the more I saw, the easier it was to adapt. And off I went. I mean, my world just cracked open.
Yeah, yeah. So I see one of the first things that you became interested in, perhaps in an educational sense, I will let you describe it to me, is your interest in marine science, ocean education, mixed in with a trip to Costa Rica to study sea turtles. So how did they come about? They didn't all come at once.
No, yeah. When I first moved to California, like I said, I was really afraid of the ocean. So my mom, being a good mom, put me in junior lifeguards because she said, when you get a little older, people are going to want to go to the beach by themselves. And if I don't think you're safe in the water, you can't go. So I said, okay, fine. I don't think I'll ever want to go to the beach with my friends. I spent the rest of my high school surfing pretty much every day. So she, she was right there. And I had a really kind junior guards instructor that as I was getting afraid swimming out further, he would just start to tell me all the wonderful things about the ocean, how cool some of the adaptations, some of the animals that could be swimming beneath me had. And, you know, of course, the ocean is not all sharks, which ironically, I thought for sure I was going to end up a shark scientist after this experience because I just found so much fascination with them. And that led me to get my first ever job, which was as an assistant for a marine biologist at my local marine science center. And being able to take care of the animals as well as go out on research cruises, collect specimens. That's when I really realized, oh, this science thing is 100% for me. And I loved fish. I loved just absorbing as much as I could about such a foreign environment like the ocean. The ocean is like space in a way. I mean, there's just so much that's down there that we just don't know. It's incredible. And so I went to college and I said, Mom, I'm going to be a marine biologist. I went there, I started taking classes, and that's when I got that opportunity to hang out for a summer in Costa Rica doing sea turtle research, which they were my favorite animal. They still are. They're absolutely incredible. And there was no way I was going to pass this opportunity up. I got a job working at my Marine Science Center in Santa Barbara, saved up a bunch of money for my plane ticket. And it was that experience that ironically made me realize that the way that people interact with the environment was what I really wanted to study, because the way that the Sea Turtle Reserve worked was that they gave limited tours as the turtles were nesting, and that tour money funded all kinds of things. It funded the center, some of the updates they were making to the live-in quarters for a lot of the biologists. It allowed the people in the town to start diversifying and opening restaurants and bars and, you know, little stands or tour companies in general where they pick people up from elsewhere. And that's when I realized that, number one, tourism is super cool when done in a more local, remote way, because I hadn't had that before. You know, and number two, just that there's a lot more than resorts out there, and tourism doesn't have to be extracted. And that question sat in my mind for literal years afterwards. It's like, okay, why isn't everything like this? Because it's so cool. So it was kind of the turning point in my life, weirdly enough, going to Costa Rica, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah, well, it's a nice part of the world, and you're nearer to it than me. So, what struck you about Costa Rica? Well, what were the differences, I suppose, between Santa Barbara and going to Costa Rica?
Well, first of all, Costa Rica is a lot more humid. It's a lot hotter. Santa Barbara, it can get kind of cold. And, you know, being around just lush forest and all of these plants everywhere. I mean, fruits as far as the eye can see. I was like in heaven. And I got a great taste of Costa Rica. I got to live with a host family who I just absolutely adore to this day. They're wonderful people. And they taught me so much about their village, about how in tune they were with the environment. I almost felt like I was back in Arizona in a way, because everything in their schedule revolved around, the natural environment. Every morning, somebody had to get up and scare the howler monkeys out of their mango tree so that they could have breakfast. So I think that difference too in pace of life, after being away from a more rural setting for a long time, it almost felt like, even though I was in a completely different place with downpours every day versus no rain and trees everywhere, it felt homey in a really interesting way. So it was nice to slow down. Their pace of life there, I think they have it right.
Yeah. Well, isn't that an easy thing to have happen to you? You move to a sort of what seems a bright and vibrant place, but what actually happens to you is that you end up adjusting to that environment, don't you? You just kind of naturally speed up. So was it so stark then that when you arrived in Costa Rica, you were like saying, "Oh, why aren't people just rushing around?"
I mean, it was interesting. So we were there in the rainy season, and every day from 3 to either 4 or 5 o'clock, depending on how merciful the clouds are, it's just downpour. And I really love the concept of having siesta. So in the middle of the day, everything shuts down, the rain comes down. My host mom would make coffee, and we would just sit on the porch and talk. Shout out to her, because I'm pretty sure that's why I can speak Spanish. And I don't know, there was just something about that almost re-regulated my nervous system in an interesting way. Like, it's true, you take yourself out of nature for so long, and then you pop right back into this slower living. And I feel like there's a part of every human being that just craves a little bit more simplicity, being able to like stop, smell the roses, or enjoy the rain and sip coffee, and there's nothing in your mind that you need to think about, like fighting traffic on your way home, or how long the line's going to be to get a lunch. And I think there will always be a part of me that misses that, and that's the beauty of travel too, is being able to find that within yourself and try to reincorporate some of the things that you learn about what you need from other people, when you get home.
Do you think that's why so many travelers, and perhaps even travel operators, have fallen into this trap, that you must do as much as you can with the time that you allocate, and in reality you end up seeing nothing?
That I wish I could just frame that and put that on my wall, because I really do think slow travel, even though you see less, I really do think you experience more. I think that travel operators try to cater a lot to tourists' interests and tourists' pace of life. And there are some people who just want to sit in a beach chair and be unbothered. And to them, I say, good, read your book, get a tan, enjoy. And then there are other people that are like, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back here. I have to squeeze every ounce of goodness out of this place and find it. But a lot of times the goodness in the place is in those slower moments. And so I always love it when I hear from tour operators that I work with personally. It's like, the hardest part of my job is getting people to slow down. But once they're there, like, they have a much better time. And so, yeah, I think it comes with trying to adapt to what visitors want versus maybe what they need, which is a really interesting balance that we see so much in the industry. And I do think it's changing. I do think people are starting to lean more into a slower pace of life, because everything, especially with AI, is just so unbelievably fast paced in our daily lives. It's almost overwhelming. So cutting out the noise has been something I've seen that's been more important to myself personally, and to those around me.
You kind of highlight something which is really kind of emerged, as you say, even more because of artificial intelligence. It's actually, as you were just saying, it's translating what you think you want to what you actually need. Do you think it needs does it need specialists to unpack people, or or is it better for people to sort of stumble across it?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think there are some people that are always going to want the specialist to tell them what's best. Especially now that people have this all-knowing being in their computer that can tell them what's best. But I love seeing in myself and in other people this moment of, oh my gosh, this is what I need. I think life is just a series of those moments, and I think they're some of the sweetest moments, even if they come in really hard periods. For me, for example, like moving, adjusting to a brand new environment, and then going, oh, this is what I needed. I understand. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a matter of perspective and what appeals best to your brain and how you see the world. But I also think when you discover it yourself, it's really fun.
Perhaps it's better self-discovery. Um, I always like to think about, are you a planner or are you more spontaneous? So, which way do you lean, Anna?
Ooh, I started off my life as such an intense planner. I mean, every single ounce of my first few trips was written in a book somewhere, and we're going to go here for lunch at this time, and we had to stick to the schedule. And I think part of that was because I had a little bit of that fear of the unknown, and kind of being a newer traveler, I didn't want to accidentally put myself in a situation that could be unsavory. But I think now I have things I want to do at certain times, a place I want to stay, and people I want to meet. But I'm a lot more spontaneous with things. I tend to enjoy just strolling around in the town a lot more than I used to. I would be so stressed that I was missing something or wasn't going to hit my schedule that I didn't feel like I could just kind of wander and enjoy. And now I think those are my favorite parts of any trip, especially too being able to get to talk to somebody and learn about their life, and you tell them about yours, and you make a friend so fast. And sometimes it's worth it to sacrifice the schedule. And if they're like, oh, hey, come with me to this beach, within reason, safety first, always. But sometimes those are super magical experiences too.
Yeah, they certainly can be. Now, getting back to sea turtles, if one has never seen one before, please describe what it is about them that makes them so captivating.
Oh my goodness. There's so much. I think first of all, they just look so weird compared to what we're used to on land, this awkward animal like hoisting itself onto a beach with the power of its flippers and this giant heavy shell, and you can hear how loud they're breathing, how much effort it takes to get up there. And yet they persist. I think watching a nesting turtle is like watching an Olympic athlete, because they go so far up the sand and their bodies are so heavy. They're used to, being a little more buoyant around in the ocean, and seeing the strength these animals have is unbelievable. So seeing them on the beach is really cool. And in that way, another way most people see them is in the water, because that's where they spend most of their lives. And their demeanor is just so chill. I aspire to be like a sea turtle in terms of the level of chill. How leisurely they glide through. I mean, any ocean animal barely moves and off they go so quickly through the water. It's amazing. But seeing a sea turtle sleep on the bottom of the ocean, even though they breathe air, is just incredible. There's this beautiful little animal nestled in between rocks or coral, taking a nap and not breathing. I mean, it's just so unbelievably bizarre. And so I think turtles represent a lot of what we can aspire to be within ourselves, how chill they are. But they're also just so weird and wonderful compared to most things that we see at home every day, unless you have sea turtles every day, in which case I say you're very lucky. So if you've never seen one before, they're chill. They kind of look like dinosaurs, and they are unbelievably fast and strong and travel such great distances. I mean, you can just tell when you look at a turtle that there's some wisdom in there that you wish you could know yourself if they could talk.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's one of the that's one of the things we can learn a great deal more from the world of nature, isn't it? As you know, we make assumptions, don't we, too many times, which kind of leads to my next question. You mentioned a little while back about the relationship between us and animals, and did you not say that Costa Rica was the first time you really observed that relationship in action? So did you come away from that with positive feelings, or did you sometimes think, oh my God, that didn't look as good as it could be?
Yeah, I think my first inkling of living with animals was in the desert, but it was more of out of caution than it was kind of in this more mutually beneficial or just mutually comfortable relationship that I saw in Costa Rica. Because most of the time, when I was a kid, it was don't flip that rock. There's going to be a snake under there. Watch out for that spider, giant tarantula. Or, hey, the second it gets dark, the coyotes and the mountain lions come out and the owls come out. You got to get inside. So there was kind of a respect, maybe a little bit of fear there when I was a kid. And so being able to see, my host mom come out there and confront a monkey and be like, you do this every morning, get away from my mangoes. It was almost like she was talking to an old friend, which I hadn't experienced before, but I loved. I'd experienced it with animals in tanks, right? But that's different than, a wild monkey. I do think a lot of times, especially now that I've traveled and that I work in the more responsible end of tourism and observing people's behavior on both the supplier side and on the traveler side and how they interact with wildlife, there's been a lot where I've been like, no, let's not do that. And those are always hard interactions, especially because as somebody who's removed, sometimes it's hard to know how to approach it, especially if it's somebody you don't know. But I think living in Costa Rica and, for example, one of the first days I was there was just this crazy banging on the tin roof and everyone's just super calm. I'm like, what is going on? And without a beat, my host mom's like, it's the iguana. It's about 4:00. Down he goes, And so I think they were just more in tune and aware of how the animals were going to move about, where they were going to go. And I thought that was really cool. It was like they were neighbors with the animals rather than afraid of them, hiding from them, or fighting against them, which is what I had normally seen. Or, seeing them as pests, which that's more what I got in the suburbs with raccoons and possums and stuff. And so I think there was a lot I could learn from that as well.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. When you go to a new environment, you go and stay in someone else's house. I always think houses have personalities. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I agree with that. Yeah. I like that angle.
Because you just get different noises in the middle of the night, and you, just as you were saying, what on earth was that? And it's your neighbours, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
Them fly. Now, I wanted to ask you next about kind of your next progression. So you were still thinking about travel, but you were attracted by marketing. So what sparked your next move?
Yeah, so I went back to school and took some more marine biology classes, and I couldn't help but think about some of the other options that I had. So I switched my major to environmental science, but I also love to write. So I picked up a business writing minor just for practicalities, and honestly, so my parents could feel a little bit better about me going into a passion career, so they say, but having some kind of what my mom calls a transferable skill beyond a PhD. That's what she really wanted. So through that coursework, I ended up getting connected with somebody who had a startup that was focused on post-COVID reconnecting people via common interests and experiences. And so I ended up getting into doing marketing for him just on a whim. I really liked this idea of everybody coming back together in person in a way that was beneficial to the community, but also, that just allowed people to get away from the technology that we had become so reliant on in the pandemic. So the pandemic hit my senior year of college. And I worked with him for a while, worked with him for a couple years. It was so fun. I got to do all kinds of random stuff. I got to sit people down for coffee and say, if you could do something absolutely crazy tomorrow here, what would you do? And then bring it to life. And that was so unbelievably fun. So I more fell into kind of the experiential marketing thing, just kind of by accident. But I don't know, the longer I worked on it, and I really enjoyed working with people, I just felt like something was missing. And I knew it was my passion for sustainability and the environment, you know? So I went back to school and got my master's in environmental science and management. And that's when, you know, you get to pick what you're going to write that big old thesis on. And it wasn't an option, but I made the case to write one on tourism anyway. And thankfully, my PI was very graciously accepting of that. And off I went into the like weird, oftentimes scary and wonderful world of what tourism looks like all over the world, which is just so different. Honestly, every place has its own story, and it's so fun to dive into it and learn. I mean, your job, I'm sure you've heard some crazy stuff as well.
Well, the one word I'd use is simply perspective.
Yeah.
I love to talk to people because of that. Because I'm sure you've seen it already. You ask somebody about a place, and every description is different, and yet they're describing the same place. And I find that endlessly interesting. Now, one thing you got into when you started thinking more about sustainable tourism is that you started, as you say, writing about things. And I just wanted to ask you about some of the things you wrote about, because they're very interesting and very relevant today. You wrote a piece about why regenerative tourism is important, and you covered many subjects about the planet, people, and why. So, what was your main takeaway whilst you were writing it, and what kind of message were you hoping to sort of to get across to people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to borrow your word perspective, honestly, because I think so. I was in the midst of my thesis when I wrote it, almost at the end, but not quite there. And I was sitting here thinking about all the wonderful field studies I got to do, literally looking at how tourists experience tourism, and then on the other side, how locals experience that, and where are the places that we can combine the two in a way that also happens to be beneficial for a place. I mean, there's so many moving parts within a tourism system that you don't see, and it was really fun to break it down. But at the crux of it all, it was really looking at how do we see tourism? How do we see ourselves as visitors, and how do we view locals? Because that is another one of those things where everybody has 50 different things to say because they've met 50 different people, right? And there's a lot of very quick generalizations that can be made, and just different descriptions that you happen to find. And looking at all the different tourism models, what I found with regenerative tourism that is just so beautifully refreshing is, first of all, it's very hard to create a fully regenerative tourism operation, but it's that type of tourism that I had been searching for a word to describe for literal years since I found it in Costa Rica. And it's tourism that benefits the community and the place, the environment, more than it takes away. And it's difficult to achieve, but once it's there, it's those beautiful experiences that are almost formative for people in a way. I mean, so many people that I had talked to in regenerative experience setting versus something more run-of-the-mill conventional, almost all of them were like, this is an experience I'll remember forever and fundamentally changed. And you don't think about how these things can rewire your brain. And I think as I was writing that paper, from just my own experience as a scientist, I knew I had to get all my points in, right? What does it do for the people? What does it do for the planet? How do we intertwine these things? And how does that play into the quality of your experience as a traveler? Here's why this model of tourism is important if you want to put a little more care into your vacation decisions. But I also wanted to describe it in a way that made it appetizing and appealing for the guests, rather than feeling like oh, I have to, or I'm going to feel really bad about myself if I don't do this. I find that the best sustainability related action comes from being inspired rather than being discouraged, and so finding the balance between, yes, lots of tourism can really be harmful, but here's all the wonderful things that it can do when you take just a little extra oomph to seek out those experiences where everything just sort of flows. And so I think as I was writing it, I really wanted to capture it in a way that was still scientific, required, but also painted a better picture of what these experiences look like and feel like, so that people could get excited about them and learn something too.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that one of the challenges of introducing travelers to this kind of tourism is to get them to care about it to begin with? Do you think there's an element of, they've never been exposed to it? Maybe they've been doing it a certain way for so long. Their first reaction is, well, why should I care? And maybe no one's ever explained it to them before. So, what do you think the right approach is?
Yeah, I mean, talk about marketing. Marketing has a big hand to play here. I think what I've noticed just from, hanging out in the industry for a while now is that tourists are very interested in their experience rather than what it does. There are some awesome people out there that are like, I want to make sure I leave a positive impact, and to you I say thank you, you are amazing. I think that a lot of the marketing that goes into the regenerative experiences that makes them successful are when they highlight how unique it is, what you're going to connect with, what you're going to do, and how that might be a little bit more of an intimate experience or a personal experience, or it's slightly off the beaten path from the norm, making those sort of statements rather than, everything else sucks and we're great, for lack of better terminology. So I think the ones with the most successful storytelling tend to win. But I also think it's a problem of access too, like you said. I mean, so few people know what sustainable or regenerative tourism is. They just want to go somewhere and get a break from work or a life. And, if you don't know about it, you can't practice it, right? Like that's just how it goes. And so I think part of it is traveler education. But I think another thing is we've lived in an industry that's been so McDonald'sified. You could get the same experience at one big hotel chain in Morocco and in San Diego, and it looks the exact same, and you can have the same foods and talk to the same people in the same language. And I think that becoming the expectation also rolled out a pretty harmful advertising tactic that worked very well, was that the local stuff is, low quality or unsafe. And so I think part of it is advertising and marketing it in a way where people see the full scope and picture of the experience, not just what it looks like, but also maybe a little bit about what it feels like, so that they can slowly reintroduce themselves to the type of tourism that got erased when all the big companies took over. And hopefully the goal with my work and in my life is to be able to connect more of these incredible local businesses to people that are looking for options like them. They just don't know they exist, so to be able to plug them back into the equation as a default option rather than as this outlier that has to over describe themselves to win business, which is what's happening right now. That would be the goal. I would love to see an industry where all the buzzwords are faded away and everything is, just by default local.
Yeah. Do you think the travel industry is become so big? And big doesn't feel like the right word for it anymore. Do you think the large players have kind of sleepwalked into a situation that you were describing? It's carbon copy this brand, carbon copy that brand, and it's only when disasters have happened, sadly, well, mainly due to the fact that we're getting more climate-related events, when large concerns have not taken enough care about whatever they've created, and it no longer fits.
All right, where were we? Regenerative tourism, responsible tourism. Ah, the big players and sleepwalking into a situation where they ended up duplicating themselves. I definitely think that that might be what happened. I think especially building a business myself and learning just a lot more, the best advice I've gotten is go with what the customer wants and what they need and what they tell you. Build something with somebody. And I think a lot of times what happens when we expand an industry to the degree that big travel has gotten, they start to take the people that don't necessarily want to get outside of their comfort zone, but want to go somewhere and do things that are not at home. And I think they really capitalized on those creature comforts and wanted to replicate the experience of being home while being away. It's so many of these, bigger chains do have the word home in them, so that they really drive home that experience. And I think on the one hand, it allows people who wouldn't normally go seek that adventure to go out. And I think when that money is going to destination economies and not utilized in a way that could harm locals or the environment, it can be a really good thing, and it could be a good thing for those people's own personal journeys as well. But I also think you're right, they did sleepwalk into it. They found a need, they found somebody who is maybe a little more hesitant than the average bear to get out and explore somewhere and wanted to go, and they gave them the tools to do that. But I don't think they really realized what that actually would bring in the future. And I think that a lot of the people that I've talked to at some of the major players, I've spoken to chief sustainability officer at Expedia. I've talked to people that are working within like the airlines vacation club type of offshoots, and they all say the same thing. It's like, well, everyone wants unique and local now, and we have to figure it out. So I'm very hopeful that one of the beautiful things that came from social media and people being able to actually get a point of view picture of some of these really cool local experiences is that now that customers are demanding to be put back into that environment, we can do it mindfully with the people that are already doing it right through some more strategic partnerships. So I think the big guys realize now what they have done and want to backpedal through partnerships without losing the millions and billions of dollars that they've made to better, first of all, blend with their community. Because Airbnb's been banned in a bunch of places. There's protests in the Canary Islands and Barcelona and all over. And I think now that they're more aware of the impacts, maybe they got woken up from this whole sleepwalking situation, they'll be able to at least slowly start to find their way back to the tourism system that we started with, that I think people are now missing. So I think it's going to be a longer, drawn out systemic change, but I'm at least hopeful at the fact that I do see it coming.
Yeah, well, let's hope they do realize it's more important. But perhaps in a way, it contributed to why you wanted to do something about it in a more proactive way. So was this kind of how you and your friend decided to create a travel company, ECPC? Yeah, tell us how you guys came up with the idea and what really has inspired you to create something.
Yeah, it was so refreshing to get to grad school and immediately meet my now best friend, who was also equally passionate about traveling, but had this guilty conscience of, oh my gosh, I want to go this place, but I don't know how to do it right. And I know doing it right exists, but I can't find it. And being able to study the industry together and go to some amazing places and learn so much about the people who live there, work there, and entertain visitors. allowed us to kind of observe the full scope of the problem from this like 50,000 foot, I don't live here, but I'm trying to understand sort of view that many scientists like ourselves do take. And we were sitting there one night and we were like, well, what if somebody could connect everybody? I mean, it seems so simple, but when you have people all over the world with different technology tools and different levels of advertising experience or just different numbers of staff, right? Some people are just tour guides and that's how they do it, and they find people and that's it. It's more complex, and we started thinking about all the ways that maybe something like this could exist. And the more we talked about it and the more we started to bring it up with some of the people we were meeting, the more we realized that it wasn't that this is like this utopia dream. It's something that could actually be creative if we just put the rubber to the road a little bit. And so we started to pursue it more and built it with the people we met rather than just assuming what they wanted and like plopping something in front of them. And it was just the most beautiful journey ever to see this company take shape and where we are now, and to be where I am today, opening up a business to business pipeline to be able to connect all of the wonderful local suppliers that exist out there to some of those big players on their terms rather than just accepting a bad deal because there's a big name attached to it. And so that's something I'm really excited about. But yeah, I mean, it all came from school, which is so interesting. Most people don't use their degrees, and I feel so grateful to use mine. But I also think it came out of a shared curiosity to solve the problem that existed before we even started down the rabbit hole into tourism. That really, honestly, like founded our friendship and keeps us curious and willing to learn today. So I think sometimes you just meet the right person to, go for it and dream together and let it ride and see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know how often you do it, but if we only would stop occasionally and look behind us and look at the route that we took and the people that we've met along the way, it seems random at the time, but you just described the person that you met and it just seemed right immediately. So did you immediately feel like you had a mission that you had to fulfill?
I think it was less of a mission and more of a curiosity. He was like, well, you like this, I like this, let's go down this rabbit hole together and figure out what the heck is up with this system and how we can get it to be more local friendly. And then from there, it was almost like the next steps revealed themselves. It was, well, okay, so if we start here, it led us to a point where we see that there's actually a need to connect people and people want to connect with each other. I mean, we wanted to find them to talk to them for our research project. And that was like case in point. And it was, hey, we should stay in touch. I would love to meet other people too. Huh. Okay. And then it slowly just unraveled as we went along this very academic path that turned more into a path of making a bunch of friends in a bunch of different places and trying to solve a problem that they all had, even though they were on different corners of the world doing completely different things with a different set of tools. And so I think there's a little bit of a serendipity, but I think looking back now, I knew that this is a problem I wanted to solve, but I didn't know what part of it I wanted to solve because it's humongous. And that even doesn't feel like a big enough word. I mean, it's just so all-consuming sometimes. But I also didn't know what manner or what tools I wanted to solve it with. I didn't want to be one of those people that comes in trying to solve a problem and makes it worse, which I think did happen with a lot of those bigger tourism companies. And so I think now I can concretely say, like, this is my mission. It's been my mission for a couple years and onward and upward, and there we go. But I think the journey of finding exactly what the mission was honestly the best part.
Yeah. So I've been having a look at some of your suggested trips. So I guess my first question about it is, how did you choose which destinations would be on your list?
That's a great question. Well, we started going back to all the people we talked to. So as a part of our research, we created a method to gauge impact, both environmentally and socially, in a way that was more friendly to small local businesses without, needing an extra consultant and $50,000 for B Corp or something like that. So it was more of a, hey, we talked to you about this for our research. Can we take you through this short questionnaire and then we'll show you, what your impacts are? And I mean, they blew us away. And being able to figure out all the data points we needed, we just picked some of the spots that, number one, we knew a lot of people were going to and had lots of options with. But number two, it was a lot of people that we had talked to and gotten really close with in the very beginning that are just making such a ridiculously large impact, even on their shortest itineraries. So that's kind of how those materialized and came to be. And there's a lot of people as well that we work with behind the scenes. It's just a matter of getting everything up on the website and ready to go, while also making a giant software product, which has been crazy, but so fun. And so, yeah, I would say, I mean, you'll see that a lot of them too support nonprofits now, which is really cool. And so, I mean, most of our sample itineraries are places we know that a lot of people go. It's things that a lot of people want to do mixed in with more of this local component. And it just paints a really nice picture of the types of trips and suppliers that we can connect you to, and lets you almost dream a little bit to fill in the blanks.
No, that's an interesting idea. Now, of course, for us travelers, we know that no destination is the same. So what would you say some of the differences are between the destinations that you've most been inspired to connect with?
Yeah, I mean, beyond, landscapes, flora, and fauna, which as a big nature nerd, I could talk about for so many more hours. I could tell you all the cool things that you're going to see in all these different places. A lot of it comes down to culture as well. And I loop food in as a part of that because there are so many foodies like myself out there that are so interested in like flying all the way somewhere to go and just eat. I mean, you see it in Italy all the time. And so being able to show them this is what you're going to see and this is what you're going to do, but here's the type of interactions you can expect. And instead of for example, there's a lot of etiquette when you go to Japan. Instead of being like, don't do this, do this, don't do this, do this, we try to articulate it in a way of, hey, want to learn some cool Japanese phrases? People will love it if you say these. And by the way, did you know that if you go to this temple, you should do this, that, and the other, because they believe that it's respectful and it's lucky. And, you might get to, go into a part of the temple you couldn't go on with like a tank top or whatever. And being able to mention those differences in a way that makes them interesting and fun. I find that in addition to the things they want to do, which a lot of travelers do come with a place they want to go and things they want to do. But for the ones who say, well, I want to go hiking somewhere, or I want to go scuba diving somewhere, it's like, okay, well, you can go scuba diving, and while you're, above the water, these are the types of people you'll meet and the types of traditions you'll get to be a part of yourself. What do you think? And those differences often, or just me talking about the person that they're going to meet, gets them so excited to make this friend or do this thing or experience this different way of eating or hanging out or talking or drinking, that they tend to pick one destination over another. So it's kind of cool that they start with the place and end with the people.
So is that did I spot a special ingredient there? So are you connecting people to specific people at each destination so they have a point of contact immediately?
Yeah, correct. So, I mean, yes, we work with companies, but we have a main contact at everyone. I mean, even for example, with our business stuff, we did the activities for the Garnier at the Grand Canyon retreat. And they were like, we definitely want to have some of our wellness influencers do yoga on the rocks in Sedona. And I'm thinking, okay, there's 3 people that have this permit. Who am I gonna, who are they gonna vibe best with? And it was my friend Lance in Sedona, who it's nice because being from Arizona, I knew him quite well. But I think it's that experience too that makes you more comfortable getting out of your comfort zone when you know somebody. Instead of bringing in a big yoga studio from Phoenix to try and get a permit for a day, which is what they were going to do. It's, hey, this is my friend Lance. He does all this stuff. I want you to tell him your dream about yoga on the rocks, and he'll tell you what's possible. And then being able to have that point of contact, or, for example, like a lot of them wanted me to have that conversation, but putting it in terms of, hey, this is what Lance thinks, or, hey, this is what Shun in Japan thinks that you should do with your free time if you're not sure. And by the way, you can, text them on WhatsApp if you need. That has been the coolest thing ever, because I've seen people who normally go to, the resort vacation and don't leave, make a friend and let that friend take them around. And boy, oh boy, I mean, they're just on cloud 9 when they come home. But yeah, I think our special ingredient is that we don't just connect you with a company name and a logo. We connect you with the substance of the experience and the person behind it. And I think everybody needs a point person, right? Like it's just nice to feel like even if you're going to be 1,000 miles away from home, somebody's got your back.
Yeah, it's nice putting a face to a name. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I can immediately think of places that stand out to me, where someone has taken the time from that company to be the face of the place and the company. You might not see them again for the rest of the holiday, but just the very fact that they went to that trouble made me remember the experience just a little bit more than I might have done if it hadn't happened. No, it's very interesting. Now, of course, it's very difficult to ask people if you have any favorites. I'm going to ask it anyway, because the world is full of many interesting places. Have you been to, or do you recommend anywhere that has really had a massive impact on you?
Oh man. I mean, I'm just like the reel of destinations like going through my head. I've had the privilege of going to so many ridiculously incredible places. I think, I mean, Costa Rica will always have a very special place in my heart, specifically, more of the rural side and the less touristy areas, even though they don't really let it get that touristy there. They have a lot of great regulations in place. Costa Rica is doing a great job. Definitely, obviously, there. I did a field study as well in Ecuador for my graduate school thesis. And that country is just so unbelievably beautiful. There's so many different environments to see. Everybody is just so kind. The portions are bigger than they are here in Texas. It's crazy. And the food is just so good. And being able to go, and as a nature nerd who watched David Attenborough talk about the Galápagos since I was tiny, to see that in person, I mean, it just like my heart cracked wide open. It was just the most beautiful experience I've ever had. And so I would say the Galapagos, and then, oh my gosh, I mean, I loved Australia as well. I think it's interesting because it's such a familiar society to California or Texas or the rest of the states, but the pace of life is so different. People really take their time to enjoy stuff in Australia, and everyone's just so open and friendly. And again, nature nerd me, really enjoyed seeing how different the wildlife was there. I would say those are probably my 3 favorites. But I also think our national park system here in the United States is another very slept on opportunity. I mean, even like state parks or national monuments, just being able to to get out there and see what North America looked like before people slapped concrete all over it. I mean, our continent's crazy gorgeous. And to be able to get to experience those, I think is really special. And part of the reason, honestly, why I'm so into the environment today. I mean, I could talk about everywhere I've went for so long because everything is just so cool. But I would say that's probably the standouts.
Yeah. You mentioned national parks. I mean, so many countries have national parks, and I thank the lucky stars, if there are them, that a lot of countries are getting into creating more and more parks. I had an interesting conversation on this podcast a little while back with a gentleman from Chile, and he was talking about parks that no one's allowed to go to, and the rationale was that we need to protect the environment first. Where do you sit on that plane? Should there be places that humans shouldn't be allowed to go?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's something to be said about leaving a slice of habitat for nature, as tempting as it might be to venture there. I also think, going back to Ecuador, the system that the Galapagos has kind of pioneered might be a nice happy medium as well. I am all for keeping isolated islands, especially like the Andaman Islands, where a lot of those tribes have never been in contact with people. Leave that alone. And if there are wilderness areas where people are literally dying to reach it, you don't need to go. But in the Galapagos, what they do is every couple of years, they rotate the different snorkel and dive sites people are allowed to go to let wildlife, reacclimate to just being a part of the ocean rather than dealing with a bunch of people with tanks on blowing bubbles in their face all day, or snorkelers slapping all over the surface of the water. And I think rotating, I mean, people rotate hiking trails and things as well now around the world. And I think rotating and giving people the opportunity to witness different sides and different sites of the same place while letting others recover is really beautiful. Otherwise, you get into a situation like Maya Bay in Thailand, where it was in that one movie, and all of a sudden everybody descended upon it, and it got to the point where it was so destroyed that people lost their privileges. They couldn't go anymore. And so I think there's something to be said about rotating and sharing, but also about the actual physical danger sometimes that goes into going to some of these sites. And I think any expedition is at your own discretion, but do you really need to die to get there? Or put somebody else, who's a guide, in danger to get there? I think we have to think about those things before we think about, all the birds we're gonna see, or I gotta climb this mountain. And some people deem it worth it, and to them I say, go for it. But just, I think, if a place has been alone for a really long time and we don't need to disturb it, it's hard to get to. Maybe it's hard to get to for a reason.
That's the thing about remote locations. Do you think there's, I think we started our conversation by, saying, it's great to feel like we're explorers. There's something inside us that wants to go and find something new, and maybe it's remote, a place that no one has ever heard of, a little red X on a map. It's that sort of dream. It's difficult to know what the limits are. Do you think it's important that we set them?
I think so. And one of the reasons that I do think it's important is because, number one, the resources it takes to get out there might be more than you expect, both financially and just everything you need to bring with you. But also, I think everybody has their own personal red X. For some people, it's Santorini in Greece, which is like a bustling, city, right, full of tourists and all kinds of stuff. And some people's red X is the middle of the jungle in the Amazon. But then I ask, well, do you need to go into the middle of the jungle in the Amazon by yourself, or do you want to go to a place where people have already, it's new to you and it's your red X, but it's a place where you can explore safely and, you know, be taken care of and meet some awesome people, rather than trying to pave your own path in a place where paths have been paved for a reason and they're awesome and all the cool stuff is over here, you know. And so I think it's about putting people's destination of their dreams into a perspective that makes it new and exciting and, you know, ticks that internal box for them, but is done in a way that doesn't cause harm to the place or the people that are getting you there, or, you know, doesn't introduce things that don't need to be there. That's the thing with remote environments. If you don't clean your shoes before you go on a hike in a different area, I mean, you could accidentally do a lot of damage. And it's so small. It's just brushing dirt off the bottom of, you know, it's tiny, but there are things we forget about. And so I think taking a moment to pause, take a deep breath, and consider what about that red X is most appealing to you and how you scratch that itch in a way where you don't accidentally leave a trail of interesting messes to clean up behind you is what makes, you know, responsible tourism separate from everything else. It's really, it comes down to respect, consideration, and a deep breath before you hit the book button, which is exactly what the big guys don't want you to do. And that's why there's this interesting push and pull, you know.
Yeah, no, it is an interesting tension, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So how does it change things for you when solo travelers want to do more travel in a better way? How does it change the conversation?
I think it's awesome. Solo travel is one of the things that when people do it, it stretches them so far beyond their limits. They learn so much. And I find that solo travelers are the most open to creating new human connection, which is exactly what a lot of the, you know, locals that I work with are so excited about. That's what gets them stoked on having tourists, is like meeting new friends. And so I love it too when solo travelers are interested in and coming in with consideration and respect, because they're being thrown into a new environment with nobody else to check them. It's not like your partner or your friend is going to be there to be like, hey, don't do that. You know, it's all on you. And so I think it's really impactful. But another thing with solo travelers too is that if you're solo, you are so open to meet other travelers and new people, and you might accidentally pass that positive message along. And so I love it when I find a solo traveler that's really into it, and I'm trying to find ways to get them so excited about the different responsibility aspects, or you know, local centric aspects, what we call local first traveling, that they can be so stoked on and they can just gush to everybody about how great it is, just to give them a taste. So I think solo travelers are cool, and having been one myself for a while, I'm in awe of some of the guts it takes to get out there and do stuff. And especially, you know, when you're making a decision for yourself, to step back and have that consideration, it tells me a lot about you.
No, it's a very different way of looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I noticed 4 words that I wanted to that I've seen you use, and that was authenticity, sustainability, fairness, and transparency. And I just wondered how they relate to perhaps a very necessary thing, which is, how do you measure whether the destinations, the people, the communities, how do you know that they're going to get what you're saying and hoping that they're going to get?
Yeah. Oof. I mean, part of the measuring is quite literally this evaluation process that we came up with some of the faculty at UC Santa Barbara. I definitely think in terms of like the hard facts, the science, and the data points, like everybody goes through the quality assurance process with the sustainability and social responsibility aspects before we sign on the dotted line to work with them. And I think part of that for us is making sure that we give people a good experience, but also it allows us to brag about them a little bit better. We get all the information we need to really hype them up to people and get them excited about what they do, give them a pat on the back that they often don't get or don't feel like they can get without spending a bunch of money on a certification. So I would say, you know, from a transparency standpoint, it's them being willing to share that information with us, first of all, because it's a lot. That's a very deep lens on their business and on how they conduct their livelihoods, you know, and being excited to share that with the people who are looking at going with them, but also the people that are actually going to join them. I think that is transparency in a nutshell. Here's what I do. I'm proud of it, and here's the impact that I've made. Honestly, that's transparency for me. I think authenticity is interesting, right? I think everything is on a spectrum, especially in tourism. And what we look for when we say authenticity is not whether or not we think that that's your culture. I can't tell you what your culture is, right? I'm not going to go to England and be like, I know so much about British culture. This is not authentic. I'm going to leave. You can tell a tourist trap when you see one. But I think part of it is this experience is something that locals have put together. And I talk about this quite a bit. I wrote a chapter on community license to operate, so developing tourism with the community in the upcoming edition of the Rutledge Handbook for Regenerative Tourism. So stay tuned. Hopefully this summer. We're in publishing, so we're over the hump of writing the thing, but we're not quite out of the woods yet. But one of the parts of community license to operate is this ongoing involvement of locals as key stakeholders in the process. And so what that means is if you're going to have a luau in Hawaii, then you better have a team of native Hawaiians deciding what parts of their culture they want to show you, you know, and that way, instead of people feeling like they have to whitewash or sanitize or modify what they do on the daily for the tourist gaze, they can decide what parts of their lives they feel comfortable sharing with you. And that to me is authenticity. And a lot of times people don't want to share that. And you know what? That's fine. There are plenty of things in my life that I don't need to share with the entire world too, you know? And I think as tourists, being able to honor and respect that a little bit more is something that we all maybe need to work on. And so I would say authenticity is letting the people who live there decide what you get to see and why. Because not everybody wants somebody in their backyard every night, and that's okay. And then fairness, there's so much in tourism where locals lose. One of the problems in tourism that we're really striving to solve, or at least make a dent in, is tourism leakage. So this process by which you come to a destination, you stay at, you know, whatever corporate things and do your activities, and you think that your local guide or your driver or the person at the front desk of your hotel is making a great deal of money because you've spent so much on this vacation. And when in reality, you know, on average, about 60 to 80% of that's right back to the big guys. And so in terms of fairness, it's, do the locals see a significant portion of the benefits? If not, why not? Can we make it better? And I think too, fairness in how they're treated. So for example, if you're going to hike Mount Kilimanjaro, there's an organization called KPAP, the Kilimanjaro Porters Assistance Project, that makes sure that nobody's getting overloaded with all kinds of stuff, and potentially putting their bodies in danger, to carry all of your things up the mountain for you while you stop and smell the roses. You know, and there's lots of nuances and human rights things within tourism that we don't necessarily think about because we're so focused on our experiences. And so one of our tenets of fairness is just making sure that we take those considerations for you, because that's our job, so that you can relax and enjoy a vacation where you don't see somebody huffing and puffing with a mattress on their back, like red in the face, saying, no, it's okay, just go, I'll be there, you know. And so that's fairness. So, and I think sustainability too, right? When you support local people, they are so much more likely to reinvest in their own communities and in the environment because they live there. It's not like this is just like a chip on their dartboard. And when things don't go well, they're like, darn, this one's not doing well. That's okay. We can market this one instead, you know? And so sustainability, in a nutshell, is living in a way so that the next generation can inherit an earth that is just as good, if not better, than the one that you found when you were born. And I think finding the people that live those principles and take good care of each other and of the planet is really sustainability. And I know there's lots of greenwashing and things out there. But the good news is working so long, we know it when we see it, and we try to connect you with it so that you don't believe it's all greenwashing, which if you do, I think that's fair for now, but let us prove you wrong.
Yeah. So how do you see the future of tourism, and how do you see the future of your endeavors?
Yeah, my endeavors as a tourist, or my endeavors, I guess, working in the industry?
Yeah, well, a little of both, I suppose. Yeah.
Fair enough. I am just, maybe I'm on the right corner of the internet. I'm not sure, but I'm just almost relieved every day when I see how many people are working now to try and solve the many problems that people have turned a blind eye to in the tourism industry for years. And seeing how many new innovative solutions are coming, or how many people are collaborating. I mean, now we've got coalitions of all the big guys working to figure out what they're doing wrong, why, and how they fix it. It's why a lot of them have started talking to people like me who are out here trying to solve some problems. So I think the willingness to collaborate and the collective awareness of a problem is going to drive some change. And hopefully it takes a shorter amount of time than I think it is. But regardless, I do think that we're starting to slowly inch our way towards a tourism industry we can all feel better about. And as we make that progress and people continue to look backwards, it's going to be really hard to fall off the wagon, so to speak, with that. And for that, I'm grateful. So I'm excited to see where things are going, and what people are building, and how it's going to positively affect the industry. I think there's always going to be somebody who's, dealing in their own corner of the world that might not be the best. But as the people become a silent majority, that will slow down too. So I would say the industry in general. Myself as a traveler, I love meeting everybody that I've met on Zoom and worked with. I think my trips have turned from me discovering a new place to meeting a new friend, and I'm just so grateful for that. Honestly, it's been so much fun. And when I don't have a friend, I find that I'm a lot more open to slow down, fully experience, and try to connect in a way that is not extractive, but is just pure curiosity. And I'm really grateful for that too. I didn't know that you could do something beyond sitting in a resort with a drink and a pineapple until I was, well into my college years. And I'm grateful for that knowledge. And I think in terms of just rolling this all together, with our company, being able to send people on these trips has been absolutely fantastic, and now starting to get more interest from businesses that want to make these SDG 7 partnerships for the goals, which is fantastic. To start to rebuild their own internal structures has been just fascinating, and so we're really excited. We just rolled out Impact Plus, which is our business to business supplier sourcing platform, so that bigger businesses can get connected with incredible local suppliers that we've been working with for a really long time, for things like employee travel, company retreats, or just travel agents looking to sell something different, and putting them in places like the global distribution system, which is the system that most travel agents use to source their suppliers, without having to put up the giant chunk of change price tag, or get discovered by somebody who finally deems them worthy. Just chucking them all in there and being able to show off that beautiful data that we've collected to these larger companies, so that it becomes less of a, well, I don't know if I should work with you because you're local, to more of a, okay, well, we have all these goals by 2030. We haven't done anything to achieve them. This person does really awesome work. They've worked with all these people, and look at where they can get us. And locals become less of an option or like a pawn on their table, and more of a true strategic asset. And that's what I'm really excited about working on. So a lot of my time has been spent in that neck of the woods in the past few weeks, and meeting all these wonderful people on both sides of the industry that genuinely want to come together to turn locals into an asset is just, oh my God, it's awesome. It should have been this way so many years ago, and to be able to watch it start to roll that way has been just lovely. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like an an evolutionary process.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. But it's so interesting to see exactly what ways it's going to evolve, in what forms it's going to take. I mean, the original vision for the system is already so different than what we have in practice, and I think it's going to continue to evolve and grow. And it's just incredible how fast it's grown on the business to business side. So I'm really grateful for it, and I know the more it grows, the more people we get to send to locals, which should have been that way the whole time. So I'm just excited to watch the impact multiply, honestly. Like, I feel like finally, now that we have this B2B pitch and mission, we're able to actually, say, look how many people we've sent this way, versus just, drops in the bucket, being able to start to make waves. So,
and that's a very positive note to finish our travel chat today. And I just wanted to say thanks very much, Annie, for taking your time to have a chat to you. We could have gone on and on.
Oh yeah, you're so fun to talk to. I've really appreciated your questions and your perspective on things. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a really lovely way to start my day.
No, you're most welcome. And thank you again.
Thank you so much.